I welcome you back to our study on the Gospel of Matthew. We find ourselves in this portion of the scripture continuing our look at the first Palm Sunday. We will be reading from Matthew chapter 21 and verses 6 and 7, reading from the New Living Translation. The two disciples did as Jesus commanded. They brought the donkey and the colt to him and threw their garments over the colt, and he sat on it. The disciples did as Jesus instructed him. Now, the question we have to ask and view this passage from is, did the disciples fully grasp what was going on? This is one question I am unsure to answer on one level. In the background of this request, and the background of this week, is the fact that this, of course, was the Jewish holiday of Passover. Now, I say that and you go, oh, okay, that's nice, but do we have an ability to, as it were, emotionally and otherwise enter into and grasp some of the feelings and some of what they were going through? And I suspect if I just say it's the celebration of Passover, that's not going to do it for you. To an observant Jew, Passover was a significant event in the calendar year. Now, not so much in a religious sense, but think in terms of it in a secular sense. Think of what Thanksgiving means, especially in the United States, or Christmas means. In terms of what those holidays convey and have a sense of. Yes, there's a day of, but it's a family event. There is the food, there's the festivities, there's all of this, football in the United States, so on and so forth. So when we think of the Jewish Passover and celebration of it, a way to kind of understand what the disciples were going through is to enter into their minds through the idea of what we think of when we think of Thanksgiving or when we think of Christmas. So it is probably not too much of a stretch to say that the disciples were caught up in the mood of the season to begin with, and the anticipation that something significant was about to happen with Jesus. In other words, they were probably not thinking all that clearly. Too much was going on. Now, to this we say this: the life of faith is lived out in the simple acts of obedience. Note what the disciples did was to be a donkey trainer. Those disciples who went on the errand did not fully understand what they were doing. Did they see what they were doing as significant? The question could be more readily answered if we had more background information. Now, did Jesus make use of animals in travel? Were there times and places that Jesus not only just walked from place to place, but were there times where he borrowed animals to help in his travel? You can't answer definitively either way, but it is quite probable that he occasionally made use of other people's animals. Why do I say that? Because if they were made available to him now, there's probably other times when these animals were made available to him. After all, Jesus just did not simply walk around Galilee. We also know he took boats. So if he took boats, there's a good chance he also used donkeys. So if we look at this task in light of the fact that Jesus probably made use of donkeys otherwise, there was probably nothing within that event and the call of these disciples to go and bring donkeys that would have, set off lights, set off bells. Hey, something significant is happening here. It seems likely that the entrance into Jerusalem was perceived as significant, but I'm not really sure that they grasped how significant. Remember, too, that when we read the gospel accounts, we are reading stuff that is written down after the fact. If you write after the fact, you tend to record what is important and forget what was unimportant. You write with a sense of what was truly happening versus what some of the secondary things might have been. The disciples on that day journey into the unknown and uncertain. You know what? That is a metaphor of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. What they did was not what we would call ministry. It was to be an errand boy, a go for it type. In the life of the church, you will discover there are people always wanting to do great things for God. And that is the problem. If what they are asked to do is not great enough, they will start to whine about the task that was given to them. You see, we tend to view ministry in the church by the task we are to do and not by the measure of obedience. Obedience is the key, not the task. If we learn to be obedient to Him, then we will accomplish much for His kingdom, even if it is not perceived as great, the task that we are called to. Obedience is only possible as we are open to hearing from Jesus. You and I will never be obedient if we do not learn to listen. The disciples who brought those donkeys had learned to trust Jesus. Would they have done what they did a couple of years ago to that event? None of us, including those disciples, wake up one day and are fully obedient to Jesus. We do not wake up and go out and go fetch the donkeys. There is a time where there is a strangeness about the commands of Jesus, where we question and say, did you really say, Jesus, go and get the donkeys? Yes, we may have to sort out what we think we heard was said. But when that is done, what we do is obey. What Jesus wants of you and I is that when He calls us to go and get the donkeys,